We all have our stories. However, certain stories are probably more challenging than others. And the question is, when something happens to you, are you able to forgive? And if so, how can you forgive people who have done something to you which probably is horrible? And I have an expert with me here today, where I'm very happy that she took the time. Hello and welcome. Oh, stop! I have to do that again. We had a audio glitch. Sorry again. I
No
have to do it
worries.
again. Okay, good. Okay, and here we go. We all have our stories. However, some stories might be more challenging than others. And the question always is, when something happens to you, someone has done something to you or with you, are you ever able to forgive? And if something happens to you, how will you ever be able to forgive? And I have an expert with me here today. I'm very happy that she took the time. Hello and welcome, Madeleine Black.
Hi, Niels. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you very much for taking the time, and we're getting straight into the topic. Could you please tell us your story? Because it's not up to me to tell it. It's something which is your story. So I would like to hear, what is your story?
Sure. So my story really started when I was just 13 years old, and I was on a night out with a girlfriend, which went very badly wrong, and it resulted in me being raped by two men.
Hmm. So that is, of course, horrible when this happens to you. And I think especially in the 1970s, way less help was available. And you are talking about the Forgiveness Project. Um, how how will you be able to forgive people who have done something like that to you?
Yeah, well, it's not an overnight thing. I always used to call myself like an accidental forgiver because I was never going
Mm-hmm.
to forgive them. It
Mm,
obviously impacted on my life for years and years and years. This is now a long time ago that this happened to me. But
absolutely.
when my eldest daughter became the same age that I was, loads of my memories returned, and I went back to
Mm,
therapy. And at the end of about 3 years of therapy, just one day my therapist wondered something out loud, and he said to me, maybe they weren't born rapist. And at first I was just so angry with him. I thought, how could he say something so ridiculous? And I was just filled with rage. But he planted, I guess, a thought or a seed in my head, and it just started to grow and grow. And I found myself wanting to understand, how could two men who weren't really much older than me, they were maybe 17 or 18, how did they know to be so violent towards another human being? What had
mm,
they seen or heard or even experienced themselves just to treat me like that on that night? And somehow, I don't know how, but I started to feel compassion in my heart, because I thought, I've done such a good job of cleaning up my trauma and living my life as best as I possibly can. I just refuse to be identified by what had happened. But they have to live, with what they did to me. And I don't think that would be an easy job. And so I saw that in order for me to let go of all the anger that I held on to, which would have no idea about anyway, it was only harming me and my kids and my friends. I could choose to forgive them, just to really cut all ties that linked me to them, that linked me to my past. And I didn't need to meet them. I didn't need to have a meeting or a conversation. It was a decision that I could make quietly within my heart. And, it really, I guess it was an act of self-love, of self-empowerment, and it totally set me free. It really just allowed me just to let go of everything that I held on to. So forgiveness, I don't want to be a forgiveness preacher, because there's many,
mm-hmm.
many paths to healing. But for me, it was about understanding, compassion, surrendering, I guess, to the facts and just letting it go.
Mm. Many people who went through traumatic situations say that they struggle to forgive because it doesn't serve justice. People serve to be found, persecuted, and sentenced for what they've done. What would you tell these people?
You know what? I never charged them. I never spoke about it for 3 years. And sadly, where I live in Scotland, the conviction rate of all cases that make it to court is appallingly about 4%. So
Oh,
even if I did now, go and report historical rapes, the chances are I would never go to court. My justice, my best revenge has been living my best life. I don't want to hold on and wait for something to happen in order for me to be happy and live my life. That's like saying, well, if I get a new car or a new partner or a new home, then I'll be happy. We can choose right now in this moment to live your life. And it was holding me back. The anger, the hate and the revenge consumed me for years. And that I wasted years living my life through anger. So it's much more peaceful and calmer to live my life from where I'm at now.
And there's strong scientific evidence for what you say as well. Maybe you heard about Fred Luskin from Stanford University, who's the leader of the Stanford Forgiveness Project, that it has a massive psychological impact on you if you're unable or unwilling to forgive. Would you confirm with that?
Absolutely. One of the first speakers that I went to see from the Forgiveness Project was an amazing woman called Marianne Partington. And in her book, which is called If You Sit Very Still, there's a lovely saying, a Chinese saying, those who do not forgive digs two graves. And it just summed it up. I was putting myself in a prison by not forgiving. I was really the one, I was the prison keeper. I had the key that I locked myself in, but I could also lock myself out. I could let myself free. So absolutely, the impact of holding on to everything just filled me with so much resentment. And I was not in a good place for many, many years.
So often we hear about leaders who, when something happens to some of their employees, so I just give you an example with one leader. One of their employees went to a client in a different area where laws aren't that strict about carrying weapons, and when he brought bad news to the client, he was held at gunpoint, which of course is traumatic. He got out of it, returned, and of course was traumatized by the experience. And after 3 months, that business leader told that employee that you need to move on, you need to keep on living your life, otherwise nothing's going to change. Do you think it's appropriate when other people tell people to get over it and move on?
It almost sounds as if he has no understanding of the impact of trauma, because trauma is going to affect people in many different ways. If it was so easy just to move on with your life, we would all do it. It took me 35 years to share my story publicly, and it was the shame and the guilt and the fear that kept me quiet. One of the very last things that was said to me, that if I speak about it, they will kill me. And this one of the men threatened me with a knife, and he had already used this knife on me, and I believed it. So for years, I always thought, if I speak, they're going to find me. Even my rational mind knew that, but my other part of my mind didn't know that. So that fear and guilt and shame, just holds you back. So people need to really understand the impact of trauma. It is not so easy just to get over something.
Absolutely. And when you talk about sharing your story publicly, you wrote a book, Unbroken. May you tell us something about your book?
Sure. It was published just about 4 years ago now. And it really tells my story of what happened that night, but it also tells my story of surviving, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope. It's not really a self-help guide, but it shows people how I got through it and how I really do love life. I really have a great life. I came to the decision that, I'm not what happened to me. None of us are the events in our life. I'm not my body. I'm not the things that they did to my body. I'm so much more than that. And my journey has really been about cleaning up the trauma and getting back to the me that I was born with. That true essence of who you are can never really be touched by what is done. So, it's great. It's now been 4 years. In the summer, I was an audiobook. And this winter, I'm going to be Italian. So that's very exciting. I hope it's the first of my translations. So I'm excited about that.
Excellent. So it is available on, I guess, all well-known platforms without advertising for a particular one?
It is indeed, yes.
Excellent. So, and also I saw on some of these platforms that it's doing really well. It is ranking, for example, in the top 250 in the category of biographies of women, where hundreds of thousands of books are in. So it's doing really well. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Sadly, my story is just a story of many, many women and men and children on this planet. And it is a global issue. Sexual violence, abuse is not something that was just my story. It's just a story of many people. So sadly, my story will always be relevant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very brave from you to share. When now people think about when now people are sitting there and thinking, and that is something which I received by email when I prepared for this interview. Some people said something happened in my life and I really want to forgive, but I just can't because I don't know where to start. To round this interview up, what are Madeleine Black's top 3 tips when someone wants to start to forgive, but they just don't find a starting point from which they can go?
Yeah, I think, initially I had to forgive myself because really I was just a naive 13-year-old that went out on a night out with a friend and had alcohol for the first time, and it went very wrong. So the forgiveness was for me to realize it was never, ever my fault. And I think I had to really look at what it was costing me by not forgiving. The price that I paid for being stuck in my trauma and my anger. Because once I've been to many, many therapists and many different kind of alternative therapists as well, lots of body work and different kind of therapies. But once I really saw it, I also had a choice. I could stay stuck as this victim, or I could choose. And for me, forgiveness was a way out. And the third one, what would I say the third one? The third one was really to look at the benefits. Can you imagine how different it would feel if you were able to forgive? What would you then be able to let go of that you're holding on to now that's really holding you back?
Absolutely. I think this is great advice. Of course, I'm going to put, is it okay for you when I put your email just in the show notes of this podcast in case people want to contact you directly? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Sure.
Perfect. So I'm going to put the contact data in the show notes of this podcast. At the end of this podcast, I can only say it's an impressive story, which is very brave to share here with us. Thank you very much. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Madeleine, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.